Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is titled Citizen Bane, the CAA, its constitutionality, its need, and its purpose. To discuss this, I'd like to invite on stage Shri Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. Shri Manish Tewari, Member of Parliament and National Spokesperson, Indian National Congress. And Ms. Yamini Aiyar, President, Center for Policy Research. To moderate this discussion, I'd like to invite Mr. Mukund Padmanabhan, Professor of Practice, Kriya University, former editor, The Hindu, and curator of The Huddle.
Okay, so thank you for being here. The Citizen Amendment Act 2019, irrespective of what you think about it, has caused this huge rift in the country, both politically and socially. I was saying the CAA has caused this huge rift in the country, both politically and socially. So in this section, we discuss the CAA, its constitutionality, its necessity, and its relation to two other projects, the National Register for Citizens and the National Population Register. So since we have just 50 minutes, maybe we just get right into it. If we can turn first to its constitutionality. There's some 140 petitions before the Supreme Court right now which challenge this. And together they contend that the CAA has fallen foul of a slew of provisions. I mean, Article 14, Article 15, 20, 21, 25, even some under the fundamental duties like 51A. But if we assume that, I think it's fair to assume that Article 14 is probably the touchstone, which declares that all people will be provided for equality under the law. Now, arguably, I mean, it's possible that the case will depend critically on how the court reads Article 14 against the CAA. Now, those who maintain that the CAA doesn't violate Article 14 argue that Article 14 was never intended to, in fact, never has, treated unequals as equals. That's Harish Salve put it somewhere. That article was never, the same law. You can't have the same law for lions and lambs. So I'm going to start with you, Manish. Yes, it cherry picks religious denominations, excludes particularly one, as we know, the Muslims, cherry picks neighbors, Bhutan's not included, Sri Lanka, China as well, and cherry picks also one form of persecution of others, bloggers, atheists are not in. So how do you address this issue that, this was never meant to be a sort of blanket equality, and this allows for or somehow makes the CAA escape this Article 14, or doesn't bring it under its ambit?
Well, Mukund, let me start off by thanking you and the Hindu for inviting me back to the huddle again. It's always a pleasure to be here in Bengaluru. So to answer your question straight off the bat, when the Citizens Amendment Act came up for discussion in the Lok Sabha, and I initiated the discussion, I did say that the bill is extra-constitutional and unconstitutional for a variety of reasons. The government's argument was that certain minorities from three of our neighbors would constitute a reasonable class to be able to qualify on the touchstone of reasonable classification in terms of holding up the validity of the Citizenship Amendment Act. In my respectful submission, that is not the case. Currently, as we speak, the matter is pending in the Supreme Court. One of the petitions is also being argued by me. But to broadly paraphrase the arguments, in my estimation, it falls foul of Article 14, the right to equality. It falls foul of Article 21, the right to life, and it falls foul of India's international obligations under the UN Convention, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on Torture, the Convention on Refugees, though we've not ratified the latter two, but we've ratified the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So therefore, there are a host of reasons why, in my estimation, this particular legislation is targeted legislation, it is flawed legislation, and I do not think it should pass the constitutional muster. But that's something for the courts to decide. I think the more relevant question is that did the government not have enough latitude under the existing architecture as it stood to be able to give citizenship to any persecuted minority? And the answer is yes, the government had the latitude under the Citizenship Amendment, the Citizenship Act 1955, as it has been amended over time to time. So therefore, what was the need to make this specific three-country amendment? And therefore, that's a question which the government has not been able to answer. Is it the government's case that under the 1955 legislation, they could not grant citizenship to somebody who was seeking asylum because he was being persecuted for a whole host of reasons, which includes religious persecution, that you had to make a special qualification for a category of people only who are religiously persecuted? And then, even when you look at those countries, there are a host of minorities that you leave out. For example, the Ahmadiyas. The Ahmadiyas are possibly the most persecuted minority in Pakistan. They are not even recognized as Muslims by the mainstream of Pakistan's so-called majority. Even the Shias, for that matter. You have a lot of people who are experts in Pakistan sitting in this room. So therefore, I think they would possibly be able to enrich this debate. But to conclude, I would just like to say that if the intent was to give citizenship to certain persecuted minorities, there was no need to bring this amendment. The law as it stood gave the government enough latitude to be able to do that.
Yeah, so Rajeev, Manish's point is that, the case would be decided by whether this is a reasonable classification, intelligible differentias, what one Supreme Court judgment talked about, whether there's a rational nexus between what it does and the objectives it seeks to attain. But he says at the same time that, look, you had the option to do more. And defenders of the law, like yourself, sometimes make out that this is a compassionate law. But compassion may suggest, look, you could be compassionate to more people. Why draw the lines with compassion and leave people out?
Okay, so again, let me again thank you for also having me here at the huddle. I think last year I was invited but couldn't make it, so it's a good change for me to be here. I've listened to Manish and I've listened to many of the Congress spokesperson wax eloquent about the CAA and the constitutionality of it. It's still not very clear to me from what he just said, again, whether he believes it is unconstitutional or that we should have done it some other way. If we should have done the unconstitutional thing some other way, or that it is unconstitutional and should not have been done at all. So there is that question that they have to answer. Let me just say this.
Rajeev, should I clarify
No,
on that
let me finish.
for a second?
Yeah.
Yes, it is unconstitutional, to answer your question in one word.
Yeah. And so therefore, like I said, the Supreme Court will rule on it. We will decide. They will decide whether it's unconstitutional or not. But here is the fact, and here is the reality. And I think it's important, and these conversations are important, because what this bill does is fast-track the citizenship for a group of people who have been refugees in India for several years, post-partition, post the partition of Pakistan. Nowhere in this act is there any prohibition for any other class of foreigner to apply for and get citizenship. So to make the argument that this is violative of Article 14 is basically to say half the truth. Point number one. Point number two. India has fast-track citizenship for different groups of people in the past. Whether it's the Sri Lankan Tamils, whether it's the Ugandan Indians, whatever. So there is absolutely nothing, in my opinion, that is unconstitutional when you take a group of people who are refugees, who have escaped with life and death persecution from Pakistan, the undivided Pakistan first, and then the divided Pakistan, and Afghanistan under the Taliban, and who are refugees here. And we, as a party, have said this for many, many years, starting way back in 2003, that we believe that they must be provided citizenship, safe haven, and refuge in India. We have done so. This does not exclude, impact, or dilute anybody's rights if they are abroad to apply for citizenship. If they are in India and already citizens, they remain citizens. So this argument and this narrative that it is discriminatory to a group of people outside who, whether they're Ahmadiyas or Rohingyas or anybody, somehow we have shut the door on them applying for refugee status and citizenship is wrong. It's just plain, simply, factually wrong. Second, the other aspect of this narrative that in some sense it puts at risk the citizenship of a minority community Indian in India is also factually wrong. But the CAA does not talk about that at all. And as I've said repeatedly, the only unfortunate thing about the CAA is that it is called the Citizenship Amendment Bill. It does not amend the citizenship. It amends the Citizenship Bill. And I've maintained this publicly. That is the only, in my opinion, if you want to point out and quibble about something wrong with the CAA, it is that it almost implies that you are amending the citizenship of people in India, when it is not.
So Yamini, would you like to respond to that? I mean, his point is it fast-tracks citizenship for some people by naturalization. It doesn't prevent anyone from coming in. I still think the compassion point is there, because if you want to be compassionate, why not be compassionate to everyone? Why draw the line at December 31st, 2014? I think those questions remain. But how would you address an argument like this? Because, I mean, with the exception of Assam, possibly, even critics of the bill don't object to its inclusionary aspect. It's the exclusionary aspect that, has become a point of controversy.
But you see, to my mind, that's precisely the problem. What the Citizenship Amendment Act does is that it creates two very distinctive pathways of citizenship for people seeking Indian citizenship on the basis of religion, which fundamentally upends what our Constitution sought to do. What our Constitution sought to do against the backdrop of a very, very fraught political and social context was to adopt an enlightened, universal, inclusive conception of citizenship. India belonged to all, of all religions. When you create two distinctive pathways of citizenship on the basis of religion, you are introducing a religion test into your definition of citizenship. Citizenship definitions are crucial because it defines, for me, what it means to be an Indian, and I think it defines for all Indians what it means to be an Indian. So we are introducing religion, and that is where the non-lawyer argument on Article 14, I think, to me, makes it fundamentally unconstitutional. Two distinctive pathways of citizenship on the basis of religion. And if you examine the religion component as well, you will see that, in fact, there is some irrational classification over here. This is not reasonable. It is not reasonable for the reasons that Manish highlighted. There are a large number of persecuted minorities belonging to Muslim religions in Muslim countries, in the countries that have been identified. There are a large number of non-Muslims who are potentially could fall into the category of religious persecution that belong to other countries in our neighborhood that have not been mentioned in this. So it seems, therefore, to me, fundamentally creating two distinct pathways of citizenship on the back of religion irrationally fundamentally challenges Article 14 and upends the constitutional promise of a universal inclusive citizenship. And that's why the Citizenship Amendment Act is deeply problematic and unconstitutional.
So Rajeev, she talks of two pathways. So she talks of two pathways. She talks of, two paths. You talk only of fast tracking. She thinks this is much more than, just a semantic issue about path,
No,
fast
look,
tracking.
I think everybody's entitled to the opinion. I think there's nothing I can do if she believes that. But the fact is the fact. And I just want to say this again. There is almost missed out in all of this is the fact that this is referring to a group of people who are already in India. We are not talking about people who are going to come in the future. This is about having a cutoff date of December 2014 and referring to people and refugees who are already in India. So if there are people today, let's test Yamini's argument for a bit, and let us believe for a minute that she is right, and there are people who are persecuted Muslims, minority Muslims from these three countries. There is no prohibition in them applying for citizenship. Who says there is? So where is this a two-track, two-standard approach to citizenship? This is just fast-tracking a group of people who have been historically promised because of partition, because of the Pakistan partition, they've been refugees in India. It is a promise that we have made. It is a promise that if you go through the history and documents, the Congress leadership has talked about this in 2003. Mahatma Gandhi has talked about this. I don't understand where this double standard comes from. Because even if you accept that there is a group of people today who are refugees in India, who are Muslim minorities, who have come from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and they are refugees in India, nothing today prevents them from applying for citizenship. So where is this double standard?
Manish, okay, we seem to have a divided house. But Manish, can you address that argument of,
Well, I'll explain the double standard, and the double standard is that the design of the Indian Constitution does not allow religion to be the basis of citizenship, whether territorial or extraterritorial. So therefore, it militates against the basic structure of the Indian Constitution, the preamble of the Indian Constitution, which clearly enunciates that India, being a pluralistic secular state, will not have its citizenship, or for that matter, classification defined on the basis of religion. That is argument number one, that why it falls on the test of double standards. Argument number two is that it falls on the principle of non-refoulement. And the principle of non-refoulement, which is intrinsic to customary international law, very clearly states that if a refugee comes to your door, you will not ask his religion, you will not ask his creed, you will not ask his caste, you will give him refuge because he's persecuted. And that principle of non-refoulement is intrinsic to the UN Convention on Torture, it's intrinsic to the UN Convention on Refugees, it is intrinsic to the Covenant on Economic and Social Rights that you've signed as a country and you've endorsed. So therefore, not only is this law problematic insofar as the Indian Constitution is concerned, this law is problematic also insofar as India's international obligations, which have been given over all these years, are concerned. So therefore, there is a variety of reasons as to why this law is problematic. And if you were to extrapolate it and dovetail it into the NPR-NRC process, which has now sparked off and triggered off great insecurities across this country, you are looking at a situation which is deeply troubling from a polarizing point of view. In fact, I would go so far to say that the CAA, NPR, NRC paradigm is the single biggest security threat which this country faces today. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at the matrix, it is alienation first, it is radicalization next, it is extremism the third. And what you have done by unleashing this genie on 134 crore people is that you've made them fundamentally insecure about their citizenship, and I'm afraid if the government does not put an end to this, the consequences for India and its implications are going to be deeply troubling in the years ahead.
So Rajeev, I mean, he's brought out this issue of the NRC, and there's no doubt that one of the reasons why this has caused, the CAA has caused so much apprehension is that it's read along with the NRC. Now, on the issue of the NRC, the BJP seems to have traveled some distance from saying at different fora that this is something that will be done. Now the tune is, oh, we haven't discussed it yet, we haven't discussed it in cabinet. Is this something like a U-turn, or is this,
Mukund, I want to just address one issue on CAA before we put that to rest. This thing that the bill refers to religion. If the entire objective of the bill is to fast-track citizenship to those who have escaped from Islamic theological states, and it is about fast-tracking citizenship to people who have faced life and death and persecution there, how would you not name them? It is almost like akin to saying that we will fast-track citizenship to the Sri Lankan Tamils, but we will not name the Sri Lankan Tamils. We will fast-track citizenship to Ugandan Indians, but we will somehow camouflage that in some fancy wordsmithery and sophistry. It has to be said that these are people who have escaped from Islamic countries facing persecution, and therefore
But his point is the Ahmadiyas do as well. The Rohingyas have done as well.
So that is a separate issue. He is now arguing
Why aren't they named, in other
So
words?
his point is, why are they named as...
Why are they not named? Yeah.
Exactly. So therefore, my point is that the bill has a specific purpose. You can argue that the Ahmadiyya should be included in it. That's a separate argument, why they are not included in it. But to focus on the issue that this bill does name these religions, there is a specific reason for it, because they are the people who have escaped Islamic theocratic states. Number one. Number two. So, so I want to say it as it is. Now this issue of this hyphenation of CAA, NRC. Manish talked about how the country is, up in arms and there is a lot of protests against it. And in my opinion, yes, I agree with it. The people are agitated. But agitated about what? They are agitated about this CAA, NRC hyphenation and all of the insecurities that are coming out of the NRC experiment in Assam. I accept that. But who has hyphenated CAA and NRC? We did not. CAA in our manifesto is a separate section. It talks about a citizenship amendment bill. NRC or compulsory citizenship is an ongoing debate for this country that has started way back in 2003, where the Congress leadership themselves in the Standing Committee Parliamentary Standing Committee of Home Affairs said that there must be a way to ensure that all citizens have a national citizenship card. That is a separate discussion. I'm happy to have that conversation. But this hyphenation of CAA and NRC, and then the connected paranoia and the connected narrative that comes out of it is deliberate. It was deliberate, and that is what has caused the unease. It is not the CAA.
Yamini.
So, sorry, but I have to trust what my Honorable Home Minister says in Parliament.
Yeah.
And my Honorable Home Minister
I
very
trust him as
clearly,
well.
and many other members of the ruling party have, you just have to Google search it and you will see, from the election campaign all the way till the protest broke out in the middle of December, there was a very clear hyphenation. And I think it is that hyphenation was made not by anyone except for members of the ruling party. And it was because of that hyphenation that a lot of the protests began. The second thing, I just wanted to go back to this issue of religion in the bill and the question of fast-tracking versus... In fact, you're absolutely right. Every country, as India should too, have a legal regime that could, on the back of compassion, give refugee status to all persecuted minorities. The problem comes when you create one channel for a certain religion and a different channel for others. And when it gets twinned with other processes, administrative and otherwise, that are about to unfold, it essentially creates paths of statehood for for some religions and paths of statelessness for others. So I think that it is superficial to say that you're fast-tracking and this is not about religion, because you're fast-tracking on, if you fast-track for
I
all
won't
persecuted
characterize what you are
minorities-
saying as superficial, so don't do that to me.
Okay.
I sit here as a responsible member of parliament.
Sure.
So let's not go down the road of you being superficial or me being
Okay,
superficial.
I take that
Yeah,
back.
okay. So good, thank you.
Manish, Rajeev, then...
There is, no,
you
let me
didn't
finish.
answer my
I just want to
question.
respond
Yeah,
to this. Look, I genuinely believe that this entire controversy has been created by the hyphenation of CAA and NRC. Now, Yamini can wax eloquent about the fact that it was started by us. I believe, and I know I was in parliament, I saw this process unfold. The CAA was a completely uncontroversial exercise. It was a bill that was going to create humanitarian citizenship for a group of people who had been in India for many, many years, and most of them for multiple generations. The NRC, and I say this again because I'm witness to it, the point that we have said about the NRC in our manifesto and the Home Minister said in Parliament was that we need an NRC. Nobody said that the NRC that we were going to come up with had been finalized, nor was it the same thing that was the Supreme Court mandated NRC in the Assam, which all of us recognize was very problematic. When you have 19 lakh people being left out of 3.3 crore citizens. So everybody knows it. It's common sense that no government will go into an NRC process that is so heavily exclusionary. But we said there is a need for citizenship in this country, which is not a fact that is new. It has been said by their own leaders multiple times, in the Congress leaders, way back from the 2000. And in today's age, when you are grappling with unemployment, when you're grappling with the poverty, and you have a finite amount of budget, is it not any country's legitimate responsibility to hold off illegal immigration and have a clear map of who's a citizen and who should be a voter and who should be entitled to public subsidies? I believe any responsible government should be doing that. And hence, the statement that we need an NRC. But to make the jump from CAA to NRC to the Assam NRC is, in my opinion, with great respect to Yamini and all of the others, is just pure imagination, kite flying.
Yeah, no, but my question was on the...
Allow me to...
I'm going to come to you, but my question was on the NRC and whether there's been some kind of sharp U-turn on this, from saying all over the place that it's going to be done. Now it's almost as if, thank you, we've kind of mothballed it for the moment because, we haven't discussed it yet. My point, and you can add to this, Manish, but what I want to ask is, do you think a clear statement from the government at this time that it will not be conducting the NRC for a while or whatever, that it's deferred for a while, will help to quieten things down? And should it do that?
So I think, Mukund, before I address your question, let me just go back to the Citizenship Act of 1955. The Citizenship Act of 1955 mandated 4 ways by which you could become a citizen of India. One is by birth, the second is by descent, the third is by registration, and the fourth is by naturalization. The element of naturalization gave the government enough latitude and flexibility in order to grant citizenship to anybody who they felt were persecuted for any reason whatsoever: religious persecution, economic persecution, political persecution. You name the kind of persecution, and that rubric of naturalization really covered it all. So therefore, there was no need to come out with a targeted legislation which provides citizenship based upon religion in a span of 5 years to certain communities, and actually has a longer pathway of 11 years for other communities, and that in itself militates against the principle of reasonable classification. Now, coming to your issue of the NPR and the NRC. I think there is a misunderstanding because people have not read the Citizenship Amendment Rules 2003 properly. Once the NPR process, the National Population Register process, unrolls, there is no way you can stop the NRC. because the NRC is embedded into the NPR process. And let me explain how. Rule 4 of the Citizenship Amendment Rules 2003 says that when the National Population Register is being formulated, at that point in time, the enumerator has the flexibility to question mark anybody's citizenship. And once your citizenship is question marked, then you go through the entire legal process of proving that you are a citizen. So therefore, even if you do not unfold the NRC or you do not roll out the NRC process, the NPR process is enough to exclude anybody from the citizenship of India that you want. That is the problem with the NPR, and that is why the Congress ruled states have all said in unison and in one voice that we will not implement the National Population Register.
Yeah, but
that's the problem.
The NPR was rolled out in 2010 under the UPA, and the NPR NRC link was also made during that time. It's there on the 2011 census. It is there in a reply that the Minister of State for Home gave in Parliament. So that linkage already existed, as you say. So if that is true, then your problem is really with the sort of third part of the triad, the CAA. Because it's hard for the Congress now to say, thank you, we didn't make that link.
No, Mukund, let me respond to that straight away. It goes to the question of intent. In this country, from 1871 till 2011, you've had a census every 10 years, leaving aside the period between 1931 and 1951. There was never a brouhaha about the census process. In 2011, and I think Mr. Narayanan was in government then, we had the NPR process in half the country, and we had the Aadhaar process in the other half of the country. There was no consternation across the country. Why is there a consternation now? And the consternation is because the intent of this government is suspect. No, because this government is deliberately unfolding this process to emphasize the otherness of the other. And it is not only the minorities who are going to get impacted. The poor, the disempowered, the marginalized will have the greatest difficulty in being able to produce documentation and prove their citizenship if they are question marked. That's the problem.
In the NPR process.
Yes.
But the government has said they're not going to do biometrics and they're not going to do...
Mukund, once the enumerator goes into the field, if the enumerator feels that Mr. Manish Tewari needs to prove his bona fide Indian citizenship, all that he needs to do is put a question mark in front of Manish Tewari's name, and then I can, keep running around catching my own tail, trying to prove that I'm a citizen of India. So therefore, your exclusion from the citizenship of India is not premised on the rollout of the NRC. It is the NPR process which is going to really decide whether you are an Indian citizen or not.
So Yamini, is this all mainly about context, which is what Manish seemed to hint, and not so much about text? Or is there a tangible difference between NPR 2020 and NPR 2010? Some people have said that in NPR 2020, you're asking for the birth of parents, you're asking for mother tongues, things were not there in NPR 2010. Are those the real issues, or is it intent, or is it, just context?
Well, you can't separate out the introduction of the new questions and intent, right? Okay. I mean, I think that the two are quite neatly intertwined, and you can't separate out the process as it is being rolled out today from the larger legislative context of the Citizenship Amendment Act. I think that the decoupling of the Citizenship Amendment Act, the NRC and the NPR, or the NPR and the NRC, whichever trajectory you want to pick up on, is quite problematic, because actually the two are quite intertwined. To my mind, the CAA creates a legislative framework within which what emerges out of the NPR-NRC process will potentially create protections for some communities and question citizenship for others. And that is, I think, what has really unleashed the fear and the questioning that is now visible through a lot of the protests. But I will also say that I think the foundations of the NPR and the NRC that were laid from 2003 onward should be questioned in and of themselves as well. I think that it is important for us to ask the question of what is the kind of data and information that the state should be collecting of its citizens, how it should be collecting them. The combination of data being collected along with technology open up many positives and many questions around surveillance and what that does. And I think that perhaps we as citizens of India did ourselves a disservice by not asking these questions loudly enough in 2003 and in 2010. And the questions and protests and debates that we are seeing today is perhaps a consequence of large-scale neglect over periods of time. The introduction of religion and the politics of religion into debates on citizenship is not unique to the current political regime in New Delhi. The introduction of the politics of religion has cut across both parties, and I would argue all parties. What the Constitution, with its promise of a universal and inclusive concept of citizenship, gave us was at least a moral check against that politics of religion. Now with the CAA, that moral check too is loosening its strength. And that's why this combination needs to be debated and discussed. And we shouldn't make, as citizens, the mistakes we made in 2003 and 2010.
Any of you in principle against the National Register for Citizens? I mean, is there anything wrong in principle? I mean, strip it away from the politics, the context, all of that. For a state to say, thank you, these are our citizens, and we want to enumerate them. Isn't that something that any modern state should aspire to, in principle?
Well, let me answer that right off the bat. The thing is that I think we've really unleashed too many processes over a period of time. So you have a census process, right, which essentially counts everybody who's living in India. Then you have the Aadhaar process, which gives identity to everybody who's a resident in India. Then you superimpose a national population register process onto it. Yeah. Well, the NPR process onto it. And then you put a NRC gloss onto it. So I think, there are too many multiple processes playing themselves out simultaneously. So therefore, if at all you want to count the number of people who are Indian citizens, qua those who are resident in India, in principle, I do not think anybody can have a problem with that. But the question is, what is your intent behind doing it? Is your intent targeted towards othering the otherness of some people? Is your intent kosher? And more importantly, what is the design as to how you intend to execute it? And that's where you come back to Assam. In Assam, you had a Supreme Court mandated, mandamus-driven process that commenced in 2010, or rather 2009, and continues till today. And what have you got out of that process? You've got a situation whereby everybody has rejected that NRC. Now extrapolate it to the entire country and see the kind of chaos that you are going to create. That in Assam, first of all, you had 47 or 49 lakh people who were excluded. Then the figure came down to 17 lakhs. Then it came down to 7 lakhs. Then I think it's now come back to 3 lakhs, and then it's been junked lock, stock, and barrel. So if you've had so much of problem in one state of India where the NRC process played itself out over 10 years, imagine what is going to happen if you're going to unleash this Frankenstein on the whole country. That's the problem.
Yamini.
Just one more thing to add. We mustn't forget in this whole process of the NRC in Assam the role of the courts as well. And when, at one level on first principles, the courts mandating the NRC and monitoring the entire process as it unfolded could be argued to be a mechanism by which you can infuse objectivity. But when the courts who are not engaged with administrative processes start trying to interfere in administrative processes, you end up with the kind of chaos that we saw in Assam. Both why the courts, while it was still taking a decision on 6A, decided to go ahead with the NRC should be questioned. The process by which the courts monitored the NRC should be questioned, because I think it should not be absolved of its own guilt of creating the kind of chaos and human cost that chaos caused to the people of Assam through this entire process. And even now, it's the questioning of the process and the junking of the process. These are all interconnected, and I think that this should become part of the debate on CAA, NRC, and the questioning of citizenship.
Okay, Rajeev, you want to come in?
So I should start by saying I told you so, but I won't say that. Look, Manish has a very tough job trying to navigate this maze of contradictions that his party has left behind over the last decade and a half. But he's making a good effort. NPR automatically implies NRC is his contention. It didn't matter in 2010. NPR did not automatically imply NRC then, but suddenly it implies NRC today. Why?
He didn't say that.
No, he said that. He said NPR automatically triggers the NRC.
Yes, I said
I was there.
Yeah, but
I'm sitting closer to him, so I heard him.
Yeah, but he said that. No, but he said that was true even then. Yeah, that's.
I didn't say, what I said is that if you look at the design of the 2003 Citizens Amendment rules, the NPR or the NRC is intrinsically built into the NPR process. And once you trigger off the NPR process, the NRC gets triggered off automatically. I said that.
Yeah, but it didn't happen in 2010.
No.
It didn't happen.
Okay.
Automatic. Contention is automatically triggered.
It wasn't operational.
It did not happen in 2010, but it will happen in 2020 because of intent. Now, obviously, Manish has gotten into the heads of people in the BJP and the government and can read their mind when they are publicly saying, we don't have any NRC plan, we don't have an NRC methodology, but obviously Manish can see things farther into the future than our own leadership can. I'll leave it at that. Second,
Isn't there a gentleman called Amit Shah, the Home Minister of India?
yeah, but
Isn't,
yeah.
the last I remember, there was a gentleman called Amit Shah, who's the Home Minister of India. And didn't he say that, we will implement NRC at all costs, and, I will only roll the NRC back over my dead body, or did I imagine all that?
No, you didn't imagine any of that. You didn't imagine any of that.
Or did I imagine all of that?
No, you didn't imagine any of that. Accepting the flaw in that argument, Manish, is that he did not say it is the NRC that is being implemented in Assam. He said an NRC, one NRC, the methodology, the documentation, the verification process. That's fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. Number two, I go back to the point that this, let's say, uncertainty, fear, paranoia, whatever you want to call it today, which has got a lot of people agitated, is because of this deliberate hyphenation of CAA, NPR, NRC. There is ample evidence for those who want to understand that the NPR is a process that was started in 2010, did not end up in an NRC. The NRC, as Yamini herself has pointed out, today is a limited exercise in Assam. It has failed, it has been disruptive, it is court monitored, it is court mandated. There is absolutely no other architecture for the NRC that has been placed in front of the country or its people for us to start getting agitated about. When there is something, when there is a debate and a discussion going on, I think all of the points that today we have learned from the Assam NRC should be brought into play and should be discussed. But as the panelists themselves have agreed, for a country of our size, for an imminent $5 trillion economy, to say we don't know who our citizens are. And by the way, Mukund, if you look at 5 trillion, I said, yeah. Oh, sorry.
It's 2.7 trillion,
No,
if I remember correctly.
Let me get back to the point.
No, India's economy is 5 trillion.
This is the same government, Mukund. And why I need to keep re-emphasizing this is, they did the Aadhaar. They did Aadhaar and created an unverified database, but allowed that database to be gatewayed into voter IDs. And had a whole set of problems of having illegal Aadhaar owners or Aadhaar card identity owners becoming voters in this country without verifying the citizenship. Therefore, I believe it is absolutely necessary independent of the CAA, and this is not a conversation that is linked to exclusion of any kind, for us to have as a country a verifiable national register of citizens. It is just absolutely important because illegal immigration hurts the poor the most. The competition for public subsidies, the competition for services, competition for infrastructure is the most intense for the poor, and they are the ones who are battling for this with the illegal immigration. And therefore, there is a legitimate need for us as a country to say no more to illegal immigration. And for that, we need an NRC. So in my opinion, this is not even an argument that needs to be had. But to now create this bogey about intent, I believe it is
But
it is
then why are
purely
you walking
political.
back from the NRC? If you think that the NRC
No.
is so essential for this country,
Yep.
then why has your Prime Minister walked back from the
There's
NRC?
nobody walked
If
back.
the NRC
No,
is the
Manish.
panacea for all of India's problems, why has the Prime Minister, in his 26 January address or whatever, walked back from the NRC? He said the NRC was never ever discussed in the cabinet. If illegal migration, and I agree with you, is such a huge concern for this country, then the Prime Minister should have endorsed what his Home Minister said, that we will implement the NRC come
No,
what
but
may.
I don't want my last word. I'm just repeating again. I believe that there should be an NRC, so does our government. But to mix the NRC with the Assam NRC and to imply that and create fear in people is, in my opinion, wrong. And what the Prime Minister said is, we do not today have a formal NRC model.
Okay, apparently we're running short of time. You want to say something really quick?
No, all I want to say is that I think we are now getting to the point of discussing semantics and processes. The larger question of who is an Indian and how do we define what means to be an Indian was a debate that was had in the constitutional amendment, in the Constitutional Assembly debates, and it was a debate that was settled by the Indian Constitution. We are now reopening it in a way that fundamentally upends some of the core constitutional principles. That, to me, is the core issue that we need to discuss and debate. NRC, NPR are...
Okay, so we're just going to throw it open to the floor for questions. Anyone has a question? Okay. Mr. Enram. You want to, yeah, we'll go to the back. We don't have much time, so can we just, yeah, Ram.
It is absolutely clear that the NPR is the basis for the NRC. The NRC will then become only an administrative exercise. It's very clear in clause 5.4 of the Citizenship Registration of Citizens and Issue of National Identity Cards rules of 2003. So will the NPR go forward or not seems to be the question. This is to Manish Tewari.
Yeah.
What are the constitutional or legal implications if states refuse to do the NPR?
Yeah, Kerala and West Bengal have suspended work. So what does that mean? Where do you stand on this?
Well, essentially, to my mind, there are no constitutional or legal obligations, primarily because in a federal polity, the government, the union government, has to walk the extra mile and get the states on board. And so therefore, if the union government has not been able to walk that extra mile, Mr. Ram, and allay the apprehensions of the state, then the states are well within their rights to say that they will not implement this process, because this process can be hugely divisive, it can be polarizing, and it can have law and order implications. So it's different from, let's say, something mandated by the Supreme Court, because under Article 141, then everybody is obliged to obey the Supreme Court and implements its directions. There's nothing in the Indian Constitution which precludes the states from refusing to participate in the NPR process.
And the present,
Yeah.
the present scheme seems to go against the Assam Accord of 1985, because we know that in the final draft of the NRC, 1.9 million people were excluded, of whom about 1.3 million are estimated to be Hindus. So if this will directly conflict with the Assam Accord of 1985 if they go forward. So they are stuck on the Assam NRC, wouldn't you say? Either
Well,
of you? Yeah.
well, that's exactly the point. So therefore, if after 10 years of a Supreme Court monitored, rigorous process being allowed to unfold itself in Assam, this is what we've come up with. I can only imagine if you are going to do this all across the country. And in Assam, the NRC has a peculiar history because this wasn't the first NRC exercise which was done. The first was done as far back as 1951, if I recall from the top of my head. So Assam has a peculiar background with the NRC, but notwithstanding that peculiar background and notwithstanding that this is the second or third NRC, which has taken place in Assam, the results have been disastrous. So therefore, there's a compelling case that this entire exercise, and because the National Population Register is the basis of the NRC exercise or is the basis of an exclusionary exercise, the government needs to call off the NPR lock, stock and barrel.
No,
Next
I think the
question.
compelling case here from the Assam NRC is that the political executive, if you subordinate this to the Supreme Court, you end up with solutions that are completely disruptive and impractical. And therefore, what the Assam NRC tells us is that that is not the model to use if you start enumerating citizens in India. That is the compelling takeout of that. It is not that that will be applied across the country and we will exclude 1.9 million times 24 states. So that is clearly not the learning from that exercise. The learning is that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, next question, please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, 1 second. The gentleman here. Yeah.
Well, my question is to Mr. Manish Tewari. Whatever this debate is going on, all the matters, all the allegation, counter, everything is before Supreme Court. And supposing in due course, Supreme Court comes out with their decision saying that since it's a parliamentary act, which without striking it out with some certain checks and balances, if they allow this thing, CAA, NRC and all this thing, still you think government can misuse it? If it is, how?
Well, what is before the Supreme Court is the constitutionality of the Citizens Amendment Act. The National Population Register, the National Register of Citizens, is as yet not before the Supreme Court. Whether it will be tomorrow or not, I do not know. Now, we will have to wait and see, because our contention is that citizenship based upon religion, whether granted territorially or extraterritorially, goes against the design and the grain of the Constitution. Now, the Supreme Court will have to rule as to whether the Citizens Amendment Act, as passed by both houses of Parliament, meets the test of the basic structure or not. And we'll have to wait and see what the decision of the Supreme Court is.
Yeah, gentleman there. No, there's one with the mic.
Sir,
Yeah, the back.
very good afternoon. Sir, good afternoon. We are a country which is having major population of the youngsters. We have to keep that in mind is the first point. The second point is the 500 trillion which our present Prime Minister is talking about. I have been talking to a lot of youngsters and all that. They want to keep religion and their profession separate. So in this debate which you all are having, if that consideration of the citizenship in alignment with the Constitution of India, if religion is kept away from all the national applications or whatever it might be, documentation of the nation, if just their profession, name, and their whatever is kept enough.
Yeah, just keep the question short and pointed,
That should
please.
take care of, I'm saying, instead of keeping religion still there, and we are going on, and it's not reaching us anywhere. The youngsters are not very happy about having religion as
Excuse me,
part of
can
the
you just keep your question short? Your question was about youth and protest first. Well, why
Is
exclude?
it about the protest, or is it about including?
There were two
There are
sides.
two questions. I mean, I think one of the most heartening, in some ways, outcome of of what happened in Parliament in the first week of December has been the large-scale mobilization of university students in India across all kinds of universities, coming out and really making the Constitution a live document and using the Constitution as a starting point for engaging in a public discourse and a public debate. And I think that really is what infuses hope for the future of India. And that's something that should make all of us across all party lines, no matter what our position is on the Citizenship Amendment, feel really excited about the future of India. In terms of the question of religion being introduced into the data collection process and the NPR question, which is very much up to debate, I absolutely agree. I don't think that, I think actually that's an unnecessary question, that it must be removed, even if the NPR has to go forward.
Okay, I'm told that time is up. I'm sorry, I've got orders from the boss there.
We can wait for the lunch.
Chandrasekhar Saab, I'm an environmentalist. I just want to ask you one thing, that the BJP government speak of moral and truth. And in Karnataka, just now Bannerghatta National Park is totally dominated by and destroyed by mining mafia. And your environment minister is having so many criminal cases, and he has become an environment minister. And it is very open everywhere. I just want to know how you will save our environment. Thank you,
You're
sir.
not linking this to the CAA, I hope. That's not one.
I think
Anything is possible.
You want to pass on that, or?
No. I think that is it is an issue. I think people are quite agitated about it. It's an issue that we are engaged with the Chief Minister to try and reverse. So don't give up hope on that yet.
Okay, can we give the panelists a hand before we break for lunch? Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I please request Mr. Mukund Padmanabhan to present mementos to the speakers. Ms. Yamini Aiyar, thank you. Shri Manish Tewari. Shri Rajeev Chandrasekhar.